So in my last video, I proposed that Totodile, Turtwig, and Litten should be the next starters in Pokemon ZA. But if I'm being honest, that was kind of just something I threw together in that video so I could make Totodile get a Mega Evolution. Basically, I was just picking my favorites. So this time we're going to do it different. This time I'm going to scientifically and mathematically break down all the statistics and figure out which Pokemon are most likely going to be the starters in Pokemon ZA. So as of right now, we actually have only one Legends game to go on, Legends Arceus, so all of our axioms have to actually be based off the starters in this game. Now that may not seem like a lot, but we actually have a lot more to go on than you might think. In Legends Arceus, we had Rowlet, Oshawott, and Cyndaquil as the 3 starter choices, and the question is, why those 3 specifically? The first thing that's pretty clear is that none of these Pokemon are actually from Hisui, or Sinnoh. I think there are 2 main reasons for this, the first being that they were just the starters in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, but I think the more important reason is that they wanted the Sinnoh starters to be found in the wild, so they had to make these new starters for this new region. So that makes our first rule that the new starters cannot be from the home region. Similarly, none of the starters in Legends Arceus were from the same region as each other. We covered Johto, Unova, and Alola, and I think it kind of makes sense that we wouldn't want all the starters from the same region, because then, it'd feel kind of like favoritism. Like, imagine if this game had Trico and Mudkip as 2 of the starters, but the third one was not Torchic. They would just feel like Torchic was being left out, whereas if you only have one of the 3, it doesn't feel like favoritism, it just feels like that's the one you picked. So, that makes rule 2, that no 2 starters should be from the same region. After that, we have honestly not that much else to go on. Like, no other criteria really seem to, jump out at you as much as those first 2 things do. I mean, I guess all the Pokemon are under 0.5 meters tall, but I don't think that's relevant. But there are some other things that I noticed. So, when Legends Arceus first came out, I actually had a really hard time picking which starter that I was going to go with. Rowlet was, my favorite starter in Alola by far. The only Pokemon since Gen 2 that made me question if I liked Totodile more than that one. It was also one of the only times that I've ever picked the same starter in every playthrough of that region. No joke, every time I play Alola, I pick Rowlet just because I love it so much. I love Decidueye so much. And Oshawott is actually my favorite Unova starter, even though my first partner in Unova was a Snivy. Oshawott just kind of came out of nowhere and became my favorite Unova starter. Although, now that I think about it, that might have less to do with Oshawott and more with the fact that Superior just gets no good moves. Of course, this is ignoring the contrary ability because I didn't have its hidden ability at the time, and we're getting off track. Now, of course, Cyndaquil is not my favorite Johto starter, that is Totodile, if you couldn't tell already. But that doesn't mean I don't love it the same. I love Totodile more than a normal person should. But if we take Totodile out of the equation, Cyndaquil is also one of my favorite starters of all time. And after thinking about that, there aren't many games where I love every starter available. Most of the generations, I can think of 1 or 2 of the starters that I just don't really care for all that much. But not Legends Arceus, and actually asking a few friends, they kind of had the same experience. So this makes me add rule 3, the Pokemon must be popular, which unfortunately means Chikorita won't make the cut. I was hoping this guy would get some love one of these days, but not today. Sorry, Chikorita. But even without the popularity rule, Chikorita would still be disqualified because I actually have another rule too. Though we don't have precedent for this at the moment because there's only one Legends game, I find it highly unlikely that they're going to pick a starter from the same region as the last Legends game starters. Like in my last video when I proposed both Litten and Totodile, they both overlap in generations, and actually when I think about it, they probably shouldn't. Imagine for a second, if they were to do Litten as a starter in Legends ZA, it would just make Alola feel like a favorited place, 2 starters in a row from Alola? What a sick joke! So for that reason, I'm adding rule 4, no starter should be from the same region as a starter from the previous Legends game. And I have one last rule that I think should be enforced. I'm speculating that because they're bringing Megas back in this game, that the new starters will get new Megas. Similar to how the new starters in Legends Arceus got new Hisuian forms. So that means any starter that already has a Mega should not be a starter in this game. Unless it's Charizard, because as much as I hate to say it, I can honestly see Game Freak giving Charizard a 3rd Mega Charizard Z in this game. It's what they do. So the final rule, rule number 5, the Pokemon must not have a previous Mega Evolution unless it's Charizard. So with these 5 simple rules, let's see what we've narrowed our starter choices down to. Number 1, the starter must not be from the home region. With the first rule, we can count out the Kalos starters. Now, rules 2 and 3 we'll come back to. Rule 4, the starter must not be from the same region as any starter from the previous Legends game. Rule 4 counts out the starters from Gens 2, 5, and 7. And Rule 5, the starter must not have a previous Mega Evolution unless it's Charizard. This counts out the Gen 3 starters and the Gen 1 starters, minus Charmander. And that leaves us with not a whole lot. So after all the rules and narrowing down, we're left with the Sinnoh starters, the Galar starters, and the Paldea starters. And Charmander. We do need 3 starters from 3 different regions, and we have 3 full regions left to pick from. So that sounds kind of perfect. I'm hesitant on using the Paldea starters because they were the most recent starters added. But if I excluded them, then we're gonna have to pick Charizard, so I'm gonna say they're okay. So, to narrow these down to our final 3 starters, we gotta go back to Rule 3. The starter must be popular. Now, I don't really have a good way to poll the masses and get a good answer as to what the actually most popular starter from each of these last 3 regions are. So... Anthony, pick one. Pick one.
The duck.
That should do it. Okay, what do we got? What's... Mudkip's not even an option! Pick one! Pick one! Pick one, please. Please. Pick one. Pick. So that didn't help at all. But what are you gonna do? So when narrowed down to this list of starters, I think it's pretty arbitrary which ones you're gonna get. I think we're most likely to get Empoleon, Cinderace, and Meowscarada as the 3 starters. I'm trying to think of other combinations, like I want to put Turtwig in there, but I'm having trouble with the rest of them. Because if it's Turtwig, it's gotta be either Cinderace and Quaquaval, and I don't really like Quaquaval, or it's gotta be Inteleon and Skeledirge, and I don't like Inteleon. So I think Piplup's locked in. Honestly, I could go either way with either of the 2 fire or grass options because I like them both fairly equally. But whatever I think, we all know the actual answer is gonna be... Oshawott, Rowlet, and the third one, Cyndaquil. Dang it. Oshawott came back and just beat it. Hit it with a steel chair, I don't know. After all those rules and narrowing downs, we're left with the Sinnoh starters, the Gallo starters... Gallo? We're taking them to the Gallows?